Well, welcome everybody, members, guests, supporters of Bicycle New South Wales, and a very big welcome to the webinar with Advantage Legal, our exclusive exclusive compensation legal partners of Bicycle New South Wales. We're really pleased to be talking about a really important subject today, staying in the know with the latest CTP insurance scheme changes. Before I do the introductions, I also want to make an acknowledgement of country, a big, important acknowledgement to the Indigenous owners of our lands, past, present, and emerging, and for all of those lands that people are coming to us from today. Myself, I'm located out in far southwestern Sydney, and that is a intersection of tribal land, being the Gadigal, Gundagra and Tharawal lands in far southwestern Sydney. I now want to introduce our special guest today. We're not the experts, but we do have an expert in the room who's able to answer all the important questions and go into all the important detail. Leigh Davidson, who's the Principal Solicitor at Advantage Legal. He's got extensive experience working in compensation law firms and ASX-listed insurance companies, and is committed to improving the way compensation schemes operate in New South Wales. And Leigh is really passionate, quite simply, to help injured people. So I'll pass it over to you now, Leigh, to say a few words.
Thanks so much, Peter. It's really good to be here today to be able to sort of give some insights into what were some changes that went live effectively over the last 6 months, but the most recent tranche has come in as of the 1st of April over the weekend. So just a bit of background about us. We're accredited specialists in personal injury law. We're very sort of experienced with the complexities that are involved with cyclists. It's always a difficult area of the law, primarily because you have a lot of people that get knocked out, have no recollection of what's actually going on. A lot of the time there's he said, she said arguments that, come from cycling accidents as well. So look, we're sort of all over that, got a lot of experience. I think our primary focus, though, is really one, I think, personal injury lawyers have probably got a bit of a bad rap going around, but we're very focused on rehabilitation. So our sort of point of difference is that we're not here just to get you, a large lump sum payout at the end of your matter. We're really here to sort of guide you through the investigatory rehabilitation phase of your claim and make sure that ultimately that everything that you're entitled to right from the outset is due to you. So we really have got a different focus on how we do things, and being so heavily involved with cycling ourselves, we obviously want to make sure that cyclists in particular, they've got a very unique set of injuries that quite often that they're faced with, but that a lot of other car accidents aren't. So it is certainly something that we're want to focus on and help people out. Overall, though, I would say, it's one of those things where, so we operate on a no-win, no-fee basis. So, you can always chat with us. If we're in a position to take people on, we will help them out. And the good thing is that if you're a Bicycle New South Wales member, we give a discount on our legal fees as well. So look, it's a little bit of a spiel to start with, but yeah, look, we'd love to help our Bicycle New South Wales members any way we can.
Thanks very much, Leigh. And so we are going to get into the questions then, and it's a bit of a Q&A format webinar where I'll ask Leigh a number of different questions. We'll have discussions, but then we will also make sure there's a little bit of space at the end to ensure if anyone's got any questions that they can be asked as well. So that can be done through going to the reactions section at the bottom of your screen and putting your hand up, or and we can ask it, or you can also put, if you're a bit shy, you can also put it into the chat section at the bottom, sort of middle icon on the bottom of your toolbar as well. Excellent. Well, we'll get into the actual questions now, and I guess, Leigh, to start with, could you give us a quick overview of how the New South Wales CTP scheme works if a cyclist is involved in an accident?
Yeah, look, at a very high level, the C2P scheme involves, ultimately there are potentially two elements to it. So the first part is what we call a no fault scheme, essentially. So if you, irrespective of what as long as you've been injured, you're entitled to recoup wage loss, treatment and home care, irrespective of who was involved in the accident, as long as there was a motor vehicle involved, right? So you're essentially having to claim against the cars or truck or whatever's C2P policy. So and assuming that there was a that it happened after a particular date. So what we're talking about at the moment is the changes that have occurred from the 1st of April. So if your accident happened from the 1st of April this year, you're ultimately entitled to a longer period of time of benefits. And I'll hopefully get to that a little bit later. But the second part of the claim beyond that, so there's that no fault element for a claim. For people with more severe injuries and who are not at fault involved in a car accident, well, then you're entitled to ultimately a lump sum payout. And there's a whole process that goes behind that, depending on the severity of the injury and what you did for work and the amount of pain and suffering involved. But there's at a high level, that's the sort of two elements of the claim.
And just to clarify, CTP is only for injury. It doesn't cover any type of property, does it?
No, it doesn't. So, I mean, you can get rehabilitation aids and things like that. But if you were looking at things like your damaged bicycle, for example, or things along those lines, the actual property that was involved in the accident, that's not covered under the C2P scheme. That requires you to actually go off and lodge either a property damage claim against some form of insurance to do with the person that was at fault, or even against your own insurance if you've got it. Alternatively, you've actually got to go after the person who was at fault directly in order to recoup that, which there's a bit of legal manoeuvring involved in that as well. But you sort of have to size up the person that's actually at fault in order to figure out what's going on.
Thanks for clarifying that. So CTP's been around for some time, but there's been some changes made to it very recently, and they just came into effect on the 1st of April, I believe. Yep. Could you give us a bit more of an understanding of what has changed and what it means for injured people?
Yeah, certainly. So, look, I should probably just preface by saying, I probably should have said this earlier, that this is all very generic information. Everybody's circumstances are slightly different. So I'll give you a bit of a sort of high level overview of it all. But yeah, look, your individual circumstances actually do matter. So just keep that in mind when we're going through this. But look, as of the 1st of April, there's even before the 1st of April, there were effectively two types of changes that came in. The first sort of tranche came in late last year, and then we've had more come in from the 1st of April. And largely they can be broken down into sort of two cohorts. So you've sort of got changes to the operational nature of the C2P scheme, which sort of improves some of those teething problems that we've had over the first, because the scheme started in 2017. So it improves some of those teething problems that we had over time. The second was actually a change to benefits. So, and they're the more substantial ones that have just come in as of the 1st of April, and they're the ones that are sort of, particularly useful. So from an operational perspective, we saw there were restrictions on when you could lodge or settle the damages case, which was the lump sum payout part. Those restrictions were removed. Initially, there used to be restrictions on if you lodged the first claim, so the weekly payments part in particular, where if you were getting paid a sum of money from the insurance company, you actually had to lodge it within 28 days. And if you didn't do it within 28 days, there was no recourse for you to provide an explanation as to why there was a delay. So that operational mechanism has now been inserted. the threshold for getting through to a damages case, this get a little bit technical. It used to be called a minor injury threshold. And the term minor injury was a little bit misleading because you could have some quite severe injuries that were classified as a minor injury under the legislation. So that term itself has been changed now. That's now known as a threshold injury. And benefits themselves have actually been extended. So what that means now is that the insurance company's got a longer period of time to actually make up their mind about whether they accept liability for your claim. Now, that's actually a good thing. It might sound like a negative thing, but it's actually a good thing because in the interim, you're actually getting more benefits. So the change to benefits is actually quite substantial. It's literally doubled. So what we used to have was a system where you would get treatment, home care, and wage loss for up to 6 months. At the 3 months mark, the insurance company would actually have to make a decision about whether you've got a minor injury or not, and whether you were at fault for the accident. Now, what's happened now is that you've now got 12 months worth of benefits. So if you have your accident after the 1st of April this year, you now have 12 months worth of benefits. The insurance company will advise on liability for the substantive claim, as in for the whether you have an entitlement beyond 12 months. They'll make that liability decision at 9 months now. So they've actually got longer to look at the circumstances of the accident, which removes a lot of the errors that were occurring because it was happening so fast. But more importantly, injured people actually get 12 months worth of benefits now. So instead of being cut off right in the middle of your treatment, or getting cut off, while you're trying to get back to work, which is what was happening a lot of the time, you've now got a 12-month period where you can properly recover, or even if you return to work, you can still keep getting your treatment, even if you're at fault, even if you've got a minor injury. So that's a really substantial benefit to injured people and to cyclists. So you come off your bike and, you might have what we call a degloving injury, which is, like you've essentially lost skin as a result of contact with the bitumen. That can take longer than 6 months to recover, particularly if you need a skin graft or something along those lines. So, and, you can have infections and things along those lines. And it's all, it's not pretty to think about. The reality is that it can take a long time to recover. And so if you were found that, it didn't actually get through the minor injury threshold because maybe you had a pretty decent recovery, or the injury wasn't so severe, but you were having reoccurring infections or something like that, these are the type of scenarios where you sit there and go, all right, these people actually need a little bit more treatment, or they need a little bit more time off work. And it's here, it's available now. So that's a really positive thing. The other thing is that cycling accidents in particular tend to be quite traumatic. You're being hit by a car. A lot of the time you're getting knocked out. So there's a lot of PTSD that comes along with it. Now, the problem with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, the problem with PTSD is that it can actually take 6 months to diagnose it correctly. So you can have symptoms of shock and what have you straight after the accident, but the actual trauma and the diagnostic criteria for PTSD takes time to develop and to actually be recognized. So for that to actually occur, insurance companies were cutting people off because that's what the legislation required. But then, we had to go and have a whole heap of legal wrangling in order to get those claims back reactivated. Now you can actually just have that information. You can keep getting your treatment. If you have PTSD, it's not going to be an issue. You're not going to have, an argument there'll always be arguments, but there'll be less arguments around whether this person's actually got PTSD because they didn't have to cut them off at 3 months. They can now wait until 9 months in order to make their liability decision. So really, really good from a return to work, treatment, support perspective, irrespective of who was at fault of the accident. So really, really positive changes in that regards from a benefit point of view.
Fantastic. And would you say there was any downsides to any of the changes, Leigh?
Probably just that the insurance company does actually have a little bit longer to now investigate the claim. So, but that's sort of a catch-22 as well, because when insurance companies have to make decisions quickly, They often overlook critical pieces of information. They make mistakes. They might not actually have all the information available. So if a police investigation was still ongoing, for example, and a police report hasn't been issued, the insurance company is going to rely solely on the word of their insured driver. And look, at the end of the day, people lie because they don't want to get into trouble. So, and it happens all the time. So with a longer period of time, it could be that the insurance companies do have longer to investigate, but whether that, that could be framed in either a positive or a negative. But look, the longer they have to investigate a claim, the more information they'll be able to get. But look, a lot of the time when it comes to the circumstances of an accident, it is what it is. So, but you should always get legal advice if you are in doubt, because road rules apply, the laws apply, and they do actually apply differently to the way people actually think they do a lot of the time. So public perception versus the way rules actually work, it's interesting sometimes, put it that way.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it certainly sounds like there's some really great, mainly positive benefits to this, which is in the best interests of bicycle users, which at Bicycle New South Wales is our primary job, creating a better rider environment for all bicycle users. And we know, unfortunately, as well, that through just through the statistics, that cyclists are actually make up one in four of the injuries on our roads in New South Wales, which is
certainly something we'd like to improve.
Yeah, a much greater overrepresentation than what we should have. So it's an important point. Could you give us give us an idea of the type of circumstances when an injured bicycle user would not be covered under the current New South Wales scheme?
Yeah, look, so CTP obviously needs to involve a motor vehicle. So any circumstance where you'll have bicycle on bicycle, for example, bicycle versus pedestrian, bicycle versus animal, single bicycle accidents. So for example, if a cyclist hit a gutter or a pothole, they just simply lose control of their own accord. Like we mentioned previously, there's no property damage involved in CTP unless it sort of has a rehabilitation slant to it, where it would be covered as an aid or something like that under rehabilitation. So if the cyclist was at fault, so you'd be limited to that 12-month period, you wouldn't get the corresponding damages case, like the payout. So you would get 12 months worth of benefits, but you wouldn't have that further payout. So I probably should note, though, that there are provisions where if a driver was unidentified, a lot of times people think they've got no claim. There are actually provisions under the CTP legislation. So if there was a hit and run, for example, there are actually provisions where people will get covered under the scheme for that. So a lot of the time people think, if I can't find out who the driver is, or if I can't identify the vehicle, I've got no claim, I'm on my own. That's not actually correct. So a little bit of a myth there, I suppose, to dispel, but that's sort of a common, I suppose it sort of falls within your question, Peter. It's sort of like, it's a common misconception where people think it's not covered, but it actually is. So they're probably the main ones. I'm sure there's others, but they're probably the main ones. Yeah.
Oh, that's really useful to know, and a little bit of a great example as well there. Could you provide us with some examples of when people are or are not at fault?
Yeah, look, I think the thing here is to really understand that insurers are led by different pieces of information, right? So there is the road rules. They're very heavily reliant on the insured driver's version of events, so the person that they're insuring, and the police report findings. So it's not uncommon for the insurers to basically disregard what the injured person has to say, particularly where it's in conflict with that evidence, or if there are witness accounts that cover off different points of view as well. So largely what you got to remember is that it's an insurer's job or a claims handler's job to really only pay out on a claim if they have to. All right. So any shade of grey is largely interpreted in their favour, because at the end of the day, insurance companies are businesses. They are there to maximise profits for their shareholders, all right, and their company. So they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt the majority of the time when the evidence doesn't support it. So I think if you look at it from that point of view, you'll then understand why a lot of the time you get these denials of claims. So some common examples of what, from a cycling point of view. So if you fail to stop at a stop sign, because you commonly see cyclists might go through stop signs, treating them like give way signs, they get collected. It's ultimately not the motorist's fault. The cyclist has effectively put themselves in harm's way. Similar situation where they've got a traffic light governed intersection, they've run a red light, or they've tried to come around a corner on a red light, as sometimes people sneak around, and they get collected again. That's a common scenario where, the insurance company is likely to say, well, you caused this accident. Another one is changing lanes without sufficient time. So if you change lanes and don't leave enough time for the car behind you that's already in that lane, for example, time to react, effectively you as the cyclist might be traveling a bit slower than the car that's in this other lane. You've jumped into that lane, but then the car didn't have time to react. It's a very difficult situation for a car. That might be one more of a contributory negligence point of view, where each party have a little bit at fault, but the insurance company is likely to deny it from the outset to see what actually occurs. So, how's that?
Great, thank you for that. That's fantastic. I guess what I might just get people to do is just turn their, if they could just mute their microphones, that would be great, because sometimes we get a little bit of background noise coming into the webinar. One thing that we haven't covered off today is why an injured person should get a lawyer following a bicycle accident when they're injured. Could you take us through why injured people should get a lawyer and how Advantage Legal in partnership can help injured cyclists?
Look, I think what you need to remember is that insurance companies are businesses, many of which are listed on the stock exchange. Like, they're big companies, right? So their sole purpose is to make money, right? And I know that there is a public perception of insurers that, that they can help people and they're friendly and what have you, and you might speak to them directly, but no matter how friendly you think they're being, the insurance company is never going to pay you out your full entitlement, okay? They are in a position of power. Now, what I mean by that is that they have doctors, forensic accountants, trained claims staff, internal lawyers, and they're all there. It's a well-oiled machine. They're all there to reduce your claim as much as possible, right? That's their role. So, they've got their systems and their processes in place in order to effectively, you are one of thousands of claims. They're not going to pay out every single dollar on every single claim, because that doesn't assist them to ultimately make profit. Right? It's no different to, when you take out an insurance policy, not every single person will ever claim on it. So it's like, well, if you're not claiming on it, that ultimately goes back to an insurance company in revenue. So it's that similar kind of thing. So if they can reduce a claim by having opposing evidence, by taking a legal technicality point, that's their role. So what we do is effectively guide you through the claim process. And we start from the outset with the recovery focus that I mentioned previously. So we think that, particularly now that you've got 12 months of benefits, you really need to maximize your recovery. And if you do that, well, you may not even need the second part of your claim. where you do the lump sum. If you recover, well, then that's great. But when you go through the process, when you go through and make sure that you actually do as much treatment as possible, and you still have ongoing impacts on your life, on your work. A misconception is that if people go back to work, that they have no claim. But that's not how these claims are assessed. All right. It comes down to what is the impact on your ability to earn an income. So if you've got loss of income, well, then those things are claimable as long as you've met the thresholds for injury. So basically, by making sure that you maximize your recovery, any of the lingering issues you have then become compensable. So our job, as we see it, is to actually get heavily involved with you to make sure that you're getting the correct rehab. If the insurance companies aren't cooperating, well, we can change rehab providers. We can do a whole heap of things, speaking with the insurance companies to make sure that you're actually getting the treatment in a timely manner, because a lot of time there are delays. Again, like I mentioned, there were, the insurance companies have thousands of claims every year. So, making sure that the focus is on you, that's our job, right? And then ultimately, once we get into the compensation space, it's to actually make sure that you get every cent that you're entitled to. So, making sure that we negotiate the best possible outcome for you, or if the insurance company is taking a very litigious attitude towards your claim, as they can in certain circumstances, we make sure that we're there to protect you and guide you through all of that. So there's quite a lot that we can do for you, and it comes from our experience, because we have worked in insurers. We've worked as plaintiff lawyers. We've worked as assessors or decision makers, as they call them, in what used to the predecessor to the Personal Injury Commission. So you have the benefit of our experience and understanding how all of this works. And it's something that we take great pride in helping our clients with, because we want to make sure that you get the best possible outcome, not only from a compensation perspective, but we want to make sure that you actually get on with your life. Okay. Nobody wants to be sitting at home for 3 years while a compensation case is run. Right? We want you getting on with life. Get back on your bike, literally. Right. So it sounds cliche, but that's actually half the time. That's literally what one of the targets that we're trying to do for cyclists. It's like, right, so your road to recovery ultimately gets you back on the bike. So yeah, look, there's a ton of benefits in getting a lawyer involved, and I think most importantly though is that if in doubt, you can always talk to us. We don't charge for an initial consult. We operate on a no win no fee basis, so the risk to you is pretty negligible. And like I said, if you're not comfortable, then the initial consult's free.
It's good to know. There's the people at Advantage Legal have got all the tricks of the trade and behind the trade, which is really, really important to understand. Just coming back to the examples earlier, I think this might have been a question you were going to ask, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there were, I think when you look back at the examples that we spoke about previously, though, there were a lot of circumstances where an injured person actually could be left without coverage. And I think that's probably one of the things that, so C2P really does only cover off certain scenarios. And I think this is where the whole having a Bicycle New South Wales membership really is quite useful, because in circumstances where C2P can't assist you, a lot of the time the Bicycle New South Wales coverage can. So for example, if you get injured outside of New South Wales, you've got coverage with Bicycle New South Wales, because it's a global coverage. But I mean, I think you're probably a little bit better to talk about the coverage than what I am. It being your product, Peter. So
yeah, absolutely. There's like you said, there's a lot of gaps in that current space when there are single bicycle accidents or bike on bike accidents and various other issues out there. And the more busy and complicated our cities and urbanised areas get, the more propensity there is, I guess, for these types of unfortunate accidents to occur. And I guess that's where Bicycle New South Wales insurance coverage comes in. So we provide a comprehensive personal accident coverage and public liability coverage. So that's particularly important, the public liability side of things, because if you potentially are negligent in an area, and you've caused an accident or have been in an accident by purely not of your own fault and damaged someone else's property, then of course that public liability coverage is able to be utilised to ensure that you're not personally paying a large payout for someone's vehicle, someone's house, property, whatever it might have been. A pet, for example, is often a really, really increasingly common one. And we do know, again, through the accident statistics, that there are still quite a large portion of single bicycle accidents on the crash statistics in New South Wales. So that's important to remember. And as Leigh mentioned as well, it is worldwide cover, so it's really important. Bicycle tourism and people taking their bikes on holidays is becoming increasingly popular. So you are covered worldwide for personal accident and public liability. With the only gap, though, is, I should mention in that, and I would also refer you to our website with all of the detail in a huge amount of detail on our website. But the public liability doesn't actually cover North America. So the personal accident is, and that's worldwide, and the public liability is everywhere else except North America. The personal accident cover is really, really useful as well. That covers things like permanent injury and cover, loss of income and income protection cover, non-Medicare expenses, and some rehabilitation costs as well. So really, really useful, and certainly a number of our members do utilise this coverage. Unfortunately, when the worst thing happens and they are involved in an accident, it's good to have that peace of mind there to ensure that they're covered appropriately. Like I said, though, at the start, though, I would very much encourage you all to take a look at the detail and know exactly what you are and aren't covered for. One of the other things it doesn't cover you for, which is a common question that is asked, is property. So things like helmets and clothing. It does not cover you for either. It's yourself, and the public liability is obviously for other people's property. I guess one of the other things we want to do now is certainly open it up for any questions. So I'm going to wrap things up now, but what I want people to be doing is just thinking if they do have any questions to raise their hand or jump in the chat and ask a question. I can ask it on your behalf. But what we wanted to highlight today is obviously really, really sincerely appreciate Leigh Davidson's time from Advantage Legal. Really appreciate you being able to provide that information and update for us. We're going to be hosting more of these webinars throughout the course of the year, every couple of months, which will be really, really useful. If you've got a topic or a key point that you'd like us to delve into in a bit more detail, we'd be really, really keen to look at that. We do have a couple of ideas to look at in the coming webinars, but we would really love to hear from you on what is relevant and interesting for you, so we can, I guess, develop a more tailored webinar around that information of those circumstances. We also want to make sure that if you do have a question, a legal question, then certainly, like Leigh mentioned earlier, he's always happy to get in touch with you and for you to reach out to them. We can obviously put you in touch if you forget to get the details. But if anyone does have any questions, Leigh, where should they reach out to?
Oh, look, the best way is probably just straight through our website, advantagelegal.com.au. You can either, all of our contact details are on there, or you can even book an appointment straight through the website itself at a time that sort of suits you, with either myself or my business partner, Anna. So we will, I think very, very, very easy to get in contact with us, put it that way. So we're very responsive. Everyone gets our mobile numbers, so it's not a big deal if you need to get through to us.
Excellent. And we're always happy to put people through our info at Bicycle New South Wales address and get them directly in touch with Anna and Leigh at Advantage Legal as well. So always reach out, and it's great to get that excellent legal advice. The other thing we have been doing for people's information is Ask the Expert inserts into our membership EDMs as well each month, which Advantage Legal are doing. And that's attached to a blog with further information. So it's a little short snippet of crucial and interesting legal information relevant to bicycle users that we've started to put in place in this year in the membership EDM. So certainly keep a lookout for that. And if you want to be able to read more information, then you can easily do that and find out further information. We will be holding more of these webinars. I'll check if did anyone have any questions and want to put their hand up or type a question into the chat function? I did have one question that a member sent through to us that couldn't be with us today, but I might just check if anyone had any further questions before we go on to that. Doesn't look like it. One of our members was asking though, if with the changes to the recent CTP insurance scheme in New South Wales, I guess, Leigh, do you see our CTP insurance policies continuing to increase in New South Wales?
As in the premiums themselves?
The premium themselves, yes.
I'd like to think not, but ultimately the money's got to come from somewhere. But I think one of the things that's occurred over the last 12 months is that the regulator, who's the State Insurance Regulatory Authority, or CIRA, they've actually been clawing back profits. So the history is that in say pre-2017, insurance companies were making upwards of 20% profit out of CTP, which obviously was a problem when people are paying $800-900 for the cost of just a green slip, right? So when the CTP scheme came in 2017, those the regulator inserted a profit mechanism to essentially say, no, you've charged too much, even and that gets clawed back to reducing to reduce the premiums in the following year. So what you've seen is essentially profits stabilize. Now, over the past 2 years, the insurance company the regulator has actually clawed back millions in profit. So I'd like to think that those profits are ultimately going to pay for these new benefits. The other thing is that what you need to remember is a large part of this are people who are at fault. And unfortunately, there's actually still a very common misconception out in New South Wales that if you are at fault for an accident and injured, you have no benefits. And it's just simply not the case. And so spreading the word about that for the benefit of injured people is quite important. But to what extent that uptake occurs will depend on, it will contribute to premium increases. So I'd like to think not, but the money does have to come from somewhere. So I suppose time will tell. I wouldn't expect any drastic increase immediately, maybe small increases, $10, $15, $20 per premium, but not, hundreds of dollars straight away. No.
Always good to hear with the cost of living pressures that are certainly facing everybody. Excellent. Well, if there were no further questions, it looks like there are no hands up. And I'll just quickly check. There's no further questions in the chat either. We will wrap things up. So I wanted to thank everyone for their participation today. We have made a recording of today's session, and we will share that with members, a bit of a shorter, condensed version for people to get the crux of the information and the changes. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us, and especially Leigh Davidson from Advantage Legal for your expert legal opinion and information and ideas on the latest changes to the CTP scheme in New South Wales. So thank you for your time today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. We're always keen to continue to bring you further information at Bicycle New South Wales. And for now, thank you and safe riding.